Hey everyone, this is Paul from Thinking Christian, and what I want to do in this video is talk about Alex O'Connor's geographical distribution argument against the existence of God. Now, I'm sure other people have made similar arguments before, but I'm specifically using Alex O'Connor's version in a debate he had. He also has a YouTube video, This Is Why I Don't Believe in God. I actually like his formulation of this, and I'm going to try to structure it into an argument. I don't think he tried to present it as a formal argument, but I'm going to try to turn it into an argument. And while in this series, I'm not going to try to necessarily respond to these arguments or tell you how I think about them, I am going to try to argue at least a little bit in presenting this, why I think it's a better argument than it initially is, and why some objections I think miss the point. So let's go ahead and get started. Alex O'Connor talks about it like this, and this is what I'm going to try to do to formulate it into an argument. This first way is going to seem very weak, and then I'm going to try to strengthen it into a better argument. So let's see what it is at first. So basically, the idea would go like this in general. Premise one, if God exists, we expect a uniform distribution of belief across geography, culture, or time. So we would expect, if God exists, that, people would come to believe in God. We wouldn't expect these huge disparities in belief or religious affiliation if God is really universal. And then premise two would say, look, there's not a uniform distribution of religious belief across geography, culture, and time, and the conclusion is, therefore, God does not exist. Now, where the theist is going to immediately counter this is in premise one. And I think that's a fair point, but that misses the point of the argument. Well, you could say, okay, why would we expect a uniform distribution of belief across geography, culture, and time? While that is one way you could attack this, I want to change this slightly, because when I write it like this, it doesn't seem all that compelling. So let me try doing this a little bit differently. So suppose we say, premise one, if God exists, we expect God to love all people equally. So God exists and God is all loving. He's going to love people equally, and he's going to want all people to come into a personal relationship with him. Premise two, if God loves all people equally, we should expect at least a reasonably uniform distribution of belief in God across geography, culture, and time. So what I'm doing in this version of the argument is trying to change the premise from, rather than saying we should see a uniform distribution, it's saying that we should see a reasonably uniform distribution if God doesn't play favorites with certain cultures or times, because the premise is that God loves all human souls equally. Then premise three would say, look, there's not a uniform distribution of belief in God or identification as a Christian or something. You need to specify which one you're arguing, but in this case, I'm just using belief in general across geography. And then the conclusion of this particular argument, if all of these succeed, is therefore God does not exist, or it is probable that God does not exist. Obviously, where the theist is going to need to push back on this is probably premise two. Premise two is the only way you can go. I don't think premise one is, or premise three, I don't think these are necessarily things you can push back on. Potential places you could push back on it, I guess, are saying, is there really a uniform distribution of religious belief versus identification? So making a distinction between, true belief and just identification for other reasons. Or the idea, maybe there's some way in premise two you could push back. Once again, I'm going to leave that to you guys to think about and to argue about. The way to sum this up, I think there are two ways to sum this up. One would be just saying, look, if God existed, we would expect a more uniform distribution of belief across geography than we see. Now, this is a little imprecise, because what do we mean by more uniform? How uniform is uniform enough? I think this can be a little hazy, which is why I think in this argument form it's a little bit better. Or you can basically say, this is probably the better way to sum it up, is look, it is improbable that God exists given the amount of geographic distribution of religious belief that we see. So that's the other way to formulate it. So thanks for watching, and let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know if you think this is a good argument. What would be your challenges? What do you think are good? I actually think this is a reasonably decent challenge to theism, at least on the surface. And I think this is certainly one that we as theists need to address. But I'm curious what your guys' response are. Once again, I don't want to give the answers away, because I expect people taking my class to be able to think these through themselves and be able to give an answer that's not just my answer. Maybe they have a better answer than the one that I have. But yeah, thanks for watching, and have a good one.